The belief that humans, Homo sapiens, are but animals, fully subservient to their surroundings and animalistic affinities, is almost commonplace, if not ubiquitous, in our modern societies. Such ideologies, in my opinion, serve as added baggage to a person's spirit, further miring us in the already cold cesspool of an abyss, that feeling that already pervades our daily lives. And thus, they make life more devoid of transcendent grandeur and purpose. We've barely discovered 3% of our oceans, and are even more ignorant when it comes to the workings of our mind-brain interface. Hence, as extreme as this may sound to some, for me, believing that a human being is a sophisticated animal, but an animal nonetheless, almost certainly positions such a person as a cognitive kin to a cannibal. Harsh, I know. Indeed, one thing cheaply offered is one's opinion, and thus could be said to amount to little. Still, allow me to continue to expound on a divergent perspective. Society today can be likened to a knitted wool fabric, constantly in the works. The fabric being the do's and don'ts passed on and amended through the years. These passed on principles, values, and dogmas need not even be told to us for us to know when things just do not feel right. For example, imagine doing something that was against the law, often a thing that is likewise morally wrong. The feeling of guilt, fear, or lawlessness, or better said, low-energy vibes can be felt oozing out of you. We constantly feel the desire to grow, to go through life bettering ourselves in performing deeds that instill emotions of self-accomplishment. Why then do different actions instill different emotions? Still, emotionally skewed people are there, and we term them mentally unstable, psychopaths, and any other synonyms to allow for euphemism. The brain, termed unstable, is a confounding notion that draws strength from the materialistic-centered paradigm that passes for normal in today's society. Instead, for a better understanding of who we are, it is better that the mind be not confounded with the brain, and thus limited to the corporeal, three-dimensional world. The chemical imbalances evidenced in the brain are deeply rooted in the vexation of the ethereal part of ourselves. Infinite memory and the soul. It goes without saying that the precepts of this book attest to the presence of an infinite energy source, which amounts to being the heart that pumps life, as in the carnal, blood is pumped by heart, to allow for our consciousness. It is this soul that I would like to tag as the self, that emotive and instinctual force behind the manifestation of our being. If you are the self, then the implication is that you are this entity of energy. We tend to forget that energy, unlike matter, can neither be created nor destroyed. This phenomenon should begin to sound alarm bells in your mind as you wonder about your importance in society, without mention of the cosmos at large. To break it down simply, you are not this weak creature, the result of socioeconomic norms projected on you. You can neither be created nor destroyed, except by your author, God. That's a discussion for another day. Think about it. This means that you've always existed as energy and are only manifest now. The self can therefore only be weakened rather than destroyed, while you find yourself still manifested in the third-dimensional plane. That is to say, when you're alive. If you're reading this book, chances are that you're already thus far aware of the notion of human spirits or beings as far more than meets the eye. How important are we to life? Well, Simply stated, I am convinced that we are centrally important to everything that is life in the cosmos. You conceited, naive worm, some of you might be thinking, squirming in indignant incredulity. Bear with me, hear me out for a bit, and much more will be expounded on as we progress. There's still more to contemplate. I believe that the energy footprint, spiritually and not just environmentally speaking, that humankind leave behind is the contribution needed to keep societies in check. The emotions and energies felt from the turmoil of the First World War and the anguish experienced in World War II still keep us in check today. Okay, at least somewhat. From such man-made catastrophes came the United Nations, UN, an organization set up for the control and maintenance of peace and acceptance of cultural variety. Diversity, an issue that our ignorantly distracted self sometimes has problems dealing with because we only see the difference in socially instilled beliefs that the outside world has to offer, rather than seeing the similar soul that we share for what it is. What is racism, if not the rooted hatred and discrimination towards another human being, due to the belief that one bodily vessel is superior or inferior to another? Take note of my use of the word hate. We'll soon talk about the significance of words and how they affect us. These beliefs are as a result of what people decide through their thought patterns, social constructs, if you will, reinforcing a certain ideology within society, a tradition to be passed on and considered as a cultural phenomenon. Energy is thus passed on and is embedded into society, either positively or negatively. The memory of injustice that the UN and the evolving world still remember allows us to keep global society in check. A reminder of the past is a reminder of the kind of future we wish to avoid. We mentioned how the soul is in perpetual need for what is accomplishment or good, and a self-exploration towards betterment. See Chapter 5 for notions of good or goodness. Is it this so-called good that sustains it? Let me revert for just an instance to the world that, with our eyes, is perceptible to us, since, after all, we best understand the world of matter. We know that nutrient uptake is vital to maintaining life force. So then, why can't the same be possible in the realm of the soul? After all, matter is the manifestation of energy, and one would think that the laws imposed on matter are manifest from this energy. In other words, as above, so below. What then is needed for the maintenance of the life force emanated from the self? We are curiously always in search of something that is intangible to complement the entity that we are. The feeling of self-accomplishment brought about by bouts of courage or effectuating discipline, or even practicing patience and love, just to name a few, is the kind of feeling constantly being sought out if one is to feel bettered. I think I'm beginning to see a trend here. Let's flip back to the matter and physical aspect of life again. The body is said to be in good health largely due to good nutrition, and one is normally of good humor after a great meal. A hungry man is an angry man, right? That being said, the same train of thought would hold true for the spiritual plane as well. The self constantly interacts with external thoughts and energies or harmonic frequencies in an attempt to self-understand and master the world around. Haven't you wondered why altercations or sad news can make you feel depressed or even literally physically sick? Being a scientist, I would logically try to explain it in terms of psychology and hormonal release as a kind of defense mechanism. But what is the animating force behind this secretion of fluids or this cognitive process we adapt? For example, the biochemical processes that take place in the human body when happy or in love are no different from the processes that occur when a large slab of chocolate is ingested. Does this mean that we should abandon everything or everyone who makes us happy and trade it for a slab of chocolate while living a solitary life? Of course not. These chemical processes are resultant from emotions, and emotions are simply messages being conveyed by the self to the body. What's important is how we choose to interpret these messages. In other words, the meanings we decide to attach to these emotions control our thought processes and hence, in time, the trajectory of our lives. So think not too much of biochemistry, because as we'll explore in Chapter 3, the body is a mere conduit, a vessel, if you may. The animating life that inhabits the body is the self, and the response we observe in the physical plane is merely the manifestation of what was internalized. The same way that the human body can be poisoned or intoxicated by what it comes in contact with, the soul must have energies it is not especially ecstatic about. These low energy frequencies other people give off, or of which the environment you find yourself adheres to, are the antitheses of self-sustenance towards betterment. Low-frequency energies are the toxic mushrooms or the tobacco to our souls. Positive, high-resonating energy frequencies and the living of one's life regardless of external situations is a masterful step in the direction we all want to go. The external situations that someone finds themselves in are results of past thoughts and their manifestations and past decisions. So, in other words, we are the authors of the life we see when we look around. The more languished my life force is, the more readily affected by external thoughts or frequencies I become, with much thanks owed to a negative world which ceaselessly weighs down on us. More pain, sorrow, and hurt exists than love, empathy, joy, and patience in the world. Such a realization calls for one to ignore the clutter of noise around them. In plain French, mind your own business. The inner you needs and yearns for betterment, betterment towards perfection. Is there such a thing as perfection? Well, yes and no. Nothing infinite can be attained in a corruptible and finite realm, but that is not the point. The journey towards achieving that ideal far outweighs the ideal itself. The person that you grow to become and the journey undertaken is a process that brings satisfaction to the end result. Success is sweeter once one earnestly strives for it, much as water tastes better after a 10-kilometer run than it does after having bloated yourself, having drunk gulps moments earlier. Perfection indeed is attained once the infinite spirit that we are escapes the confines of the finite body that we dress ourselves with. Ethereal nervous system, language, and listening to yourself. Emotions are the messages that the entity that we are attempts to convey to the conduit and to the external realm, physical plane. Emotions can be thought of analogically as tied to the mind, the domain of consciousness, the way that electrical impulses set off by the body's 5 senses is to the brain, and vice versa. Therefore, analogically speaking, your consciousness can choose to ignore the messages coming into the soul via these external frequencies. Emotions are the spiritual vibrations that both cause and are caused by resonance. Upon contact, as though walking through air, whenever we pick up on energy signatures, these vibrations are internalized, deciphered, and then translated into emotions. Whether bleak or jolly depends on our worldview. Think of what takes place internally in the physical plane when we touch a table. Through the nerve cells on our fingertips, this information is internalized biochemically, neurotransmitters. En suite, there is a rush of electrical currents that flood the system, information in a language understood by our central nervous system. The link between our perceptions or internalized interpretations of spoken and written words, like any mental tool used to better understand our physical world, images, footage, etc., and its effect on our psyche, best comes together in Dr. Emoto's experiment. Dr. Masaru Emoto had set out to prove that the molecular structure of water can be changed, shaped by human consciousness. This should not sound a far-reaching notion considering we already know of electrons' behavior switching capabilities when under observation, the double-slit experiment. Thus, in physics experiments and the physics community in general, it goes without mention that the presence of an observer alters the result of an experiment in quantum mechanics. Experiments done by Dr. Emoto using water as a medium best explain the link between words, or the connotations they bear, emotions, and the frequencies emitted by these emotive inscriptions. The experiment entailed writing the words hate and love in two separate water-filled containers. When attaching these labels to the water bottles, Dr. Emoto thought of as many notions and things that embodied both love and hate. The goal of the experiment was to view the crystalline patterns formed in the ice. After several hours, exposed to the freezing conditions in the refrigerator, the bottles were brought out to the warm light of day. The result was fascinating, to say the least. The patterns produced within the crystalline ice had displayed a night and day contrast between words associated with positivity on one hand and those with negativity on the other. For example, the container with the word hate written on it was coded in a dull and gloomy portrayal molecular organization, and this was in comparison to the eye-catching stunning container with the love label slapped on, which showed an intricate and complex myriad of patterns. This kind of complexity and symmetric beauty in patterns can also be noticed when grains of sand, or whatever's convenient like salt, are placed on a subwoofer vibrating at high frequencies. Just as dull and simple patterns are observed of the sand when the very subwoofer gives off a low pitch, low frequency. The difference in patterns formed by the clusters of grain exposed to different pitches in sound does not fall short of outstanding, as low-frequency sounds produce non-attractive, dull-like patterns, in contrast to the beautiful mosaic seen from high-frequency sound vibrations. Our world is filled with all kinds of waves, micro, infrared, gamma, etc., that the eye can't see. We and the world around us are in tune with and are created for harmonics. I mean, ask yourself, why does a certain song resonate with you? Resonance can be described as the merging of two waves, superposition, to create a constructive wave, bigger wave, while the inverse of resonance implies attenuation of vibrations, or the formation of destructive wave patterns, as physics would explain. What this implies is that harmonics, or music, is a language the soul understands. Thus, with this understanding comes a reaction, good or bad, advantageous or detrimental. Emotions can work for or against us. Again, this is just a matter of perspective. How do we initiate steps that will allow us to use emotions to our benefit? Recalling that we control the way we view every situation we are faced with, it is important that we only take decisive action after allowing for calm to settle. Take an interaction between two people. Each party enters into conversation with a certain paradigm or worldview. Furthermore, a rotten mood harbored by one of the individuals could bode wrong for the other. All these frustrations and anxieties, emotions that emit low-frequency, low-pitch vibrations throughout the host's bodily vessel, are thus transferred over in speech and mannerism. We could sometimes pick on energies, almost as though walking through air without being aware of the origins of these vibrations. Again, as is evident in the physical realm, i.e. with the body, we encounter a bazillion, I guess it's now a word, bacteria and particles, not all of which are of concern to the state of our health. Heck, we even host some bacteria to help us better digest certain foods, as the microbes have themselves a jolly, moist, good time in our intestines. Only upon eliminating the noises about within and around us that accompany the relevant information transmitted to you by yourself in regards to what your surrounding has to offer. A refinement of our listening abilities goes a long way in making the process of self-accomplishment readily feasible. From our emotions and thoughts come decisions. Making a decision is not a simple yes or no matter, but rather an emotional conviction. What do I mean by that? Well, you have to use the very emotions that either haunt or flatter you when making your decisions. You have to say yes or no with purpose, always having a source of emotive fuel to rely on. That fuel is often centered on the question, why? As in, why part ways with a bad habit or a grudge? To be sure, the answer to this is just as important as the question. A selfish desire in the mix should hint at an adulterated ideal. Not letting a situation conquer your life means that you use the same low-frequency emotions projected at you with decisiveness and purpose, while linking this to how you were made to feel. This has led you to a place of no more. For that conviction to last, I have to know who I am. I've better listen to myself. And because you know who you are, because you know what you are capable of doing, infinitely many things you focus your mind to do with definiteness of purpose, you can use the same emotions to channel greatness, knowing full well that you are no duck. No offense to duck lovers, but an eagle, worthy of reaching high altitudes and deserving only the best life has to offer to nourish yourself. That this book has stood out to you, that you have gotten this far into it, speaks of a powerful essence within you that refuses to fall short of true humanness. The use of your emotions to take charge and live life purposely is a way to communicate or let yourself understand what is expected from yourself by yourself. Change is not the easiest thing to do. If that were the case, people wouldn't be living life trying to please their friends or loved ones, or the society in general, whilst dwindling in self-pity. Change sparks up emotions of fear and doubt. Yet, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Yes, if there should be any fear found in you, it should be that of fearing fear itself. Fear and doubt are sister emotions. They always work hand in hand. These two qualities are one of, if not the most dangerous feelings or vibrations to have within you. Nothing limits you more, withholding you from the potential you deserve to reach, than these two emotions. Fear and doubt are the toxic antithesis of faith and belief. The more of one means the less of the other, meaning the more you doubt yourself, the more you fear, thus the less faith you have and the less you believe in yourself. Fear and doubt must be the first things to leave your life if any change is to be seen. In one of his songs, one of my good friends, Samora, once said something along the lines of, "You can't let the fear of success stop you from achieving any success at all." We are so afraid of failure and the implications attached to failure in modern-day society that we tend to forget that failure just means a closer step towards getting it right. If we gave up on our children as they tried to imitate us in walking and called them failures, what progress would there be? Okay, sure, there would be progress, although very slow progress, but advancement nonetheless, just because at that age, babies don't let such petty issues deter them from what they're trying to achieve. Problem is, we keep instilling such negative ways of response in our children through the way we view life. To be successful, you have to go to school, then 8 years of university, so as to get a doctorate. If not, society will view you as a failure not worth noticing. Well, that's not true. I would like to use an example of a well-known celebrity, Oprah Winfrey, just because my mom loves her show. What if she gave up, crawled into a fetal position for the rest of her life just because her mom was the victim, as people would say, of teenage pregnancy. Like mother, like daughter, she found herself in the same situation at 13 and then lost the child in stillbirth. This frustrated youth with an impoverished background found herself in juvenile detention not long after, not far from a prison scene. Imagine if she continually kept on judging herself by the situations she found herself in, rather than pause for a second to think of what to do. Or imagine if she had earned a lot of money later and indulged in drug and self-abuse just as a means to escape her past. What kind of reality would these low-frequency vibrations create for her then? Instead, she is one of the richest celebrities in both material wealth and mental status. She used these same emotions that followed her during her early life to decide to live purposefully. I don't believe in luck. We create our own luck. Side story. When I was born, my parents opted to name me Oliver. According to what my mom tells me, it was the name given to one of her late friend's sons. He died of bronchitis and lung issues and never made it past the age of 7. So just like the words written on the container, names have energies and frequencies attached to them. By the time I got to experience life through my infant body, with no more than 3 months having gone by, I had allergic reactions and bronchitis episodes that could rival any immune system deficient 10-year-old boy. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the name Oliver is a bad name, au contraire. I seem to find Oliver Twist quite amusing and of notable character. What I'm saying is that the name did not belong to me. It's as if I was the second version of the failed prototype, which is the feeling I felt when my mom told me this story. I could feel the mind state or the state of thoughts with which that name had when released to me. My parents were not religious at the time, but even as doctors, they were parents first, and thus some actions taken to change my state of affairs may have seemed out of character. What at first seemed irrational to them soon became just another stone unturned. They turned to religion for help, and this complete turn of events, I shit you not, worked. My old name was dropped, and the name Joshua was accompanied by some much-craved relief and peace, for once in my short bodily existence. I no longer had bronchi-inflamed episodes, though I later grew up to have asthma, and even that was healed by what I'll try to remember to explain later. I was, for the most part, an allergy-free baby, down to harboring only 2 allergies from a legion of them. As an adolescent in high school, my friends and I ignorantly used to joke about how most externally beautiful-looking girls always seem to have gorgeous names. This had led us to the conclusion that we had to name our future daughters the most beautiful of names to make sure that they came out right. For some reason, bursting out of the house, a revolver in one hand and a baseball bat in the other was the quintessential dad look. I mean, better that than the reality of having an ugly-looking daughter, we'd thought naively. Although I was raised in a spiritual home, where I was told that true beauty is actually from within, from the self, rather than what we see on the outside, I preferred to have the perspective of a normal kid, to think like everyone else. Let me ask you something. What makes someone attractive to others? Beauty is not limited to the person's physical appearance and well-defined symmetry. One thing I seldom wondered as a preteen was, why is this most average-looking of all chaps in a dedicated, loving relationship with the most externally gorgeous-looking woman? I failed to grasp that it was partly because this so-called average guy was actually more than average. His character and personality were alluring to that particular person. This character and personality is a result of the different experiences he underwent throughout his life and the way in which he handled those situations. His thoughts and decisions had made him the attractive person he now was. I don't believe in mistakes. Everything that happens comes to pass for a reason, and this reason depends on how we interpret what happens to us. Pain is normally looked at as an outcome to avoid. With no pain comes no progress. I mean, how else do you learn? Every pain you experience in life elicits emotions, attaching meaning. It affects the inner core of your being. As stated previously, how we interpret these emotions shapes our end result as human beings. My youngest brother, David, is obsessed with working out and weight gain muscle building activities. I was once there too, and one thing that he constantly clings to is that there is no gain if there is no pain. No pain, no gain. So the best way to deal with pain, or any emotion that our self-limiting brain interprets as unpleasant feeling, to be escaped, is to burrow through and deal with matters head on. Pain should get us to constantly ask what lessons are to be learned from the soul's attempt at communication, and how can this pain better me to not go through the same experiences. The self is you. You are your soul, and the material aspect of the world is how our consciousness makes sense of all the emotions, signal messages that the environment is lancing at us. In essence, the mind is what we use to term one's collective consciousness, and the mind is the brain to our soul, implying that the soul is the heart and body to our consciousness. We are a force to be reckoned with only, and only if we know who we truly are, vis-a-vis everything and everyone around us. We have to be aware of the problem to even begin conceiving of a solution. Therefore, I would like you to continue with me on this voyage of words, thoughts, and energy in an attempt to reach perfection, an attempt which begins by firstly being self-aware.